When I was 26 years old, I was traveling in the Amazon River Basin with this guy, Patchen Miller. We were 26. It was 1995. You can do the math, I'm 48. And we were ambushed. He was shot and killed, and I was left for dead. And it was a very powerful experience for a 26-year-old. And I came back from the experience with a sort of a dystopian feeling about the world. Sort of this feeling like, wow, life is short, which is usually something that people figure out more like when they're my age now than 22 years ago. And this feeling, an abiding feeling like I really want to focus on things that matter most, that I have a short time on this planet and I want to have the maximum impact, if you will. I want to have the maximum leverage possible to make the world a better place. And I, just like you, am not comfortable with headlines like this from the last couple of years. Child poverty amongst the worst in the developed world. Estimates that the US government wastes somewhere around $1 trillion or more every year of our tax dollars because of inefficiency. That our healthcare is still ranked certainly amongst the most expensive and one of the worst in the developed world. That we have 5% of the world's population, and we have almost 25% of the world's prisoners, that our middle class is dwindling, that our schools are not standing up in comparison to other schools around the developed world, that climate change is inevitable, even irreversible, but very little is being done to address it. In fact, every issue is sort of stuck and not moving forward the way it should, and it's because of system failure. We have a system failure which I'm going to get into in this presentation, but more importantly, I'm going to talk about how we're going to fix that system failure. But when you really think about that failure, you could sort of sum it up with this photo right here. That we have a system that is working extremely well for a small set of moneyed interests that are aligned ideologically both with Democrats and Republicans on the left and right, and most of the rest of America is getting left out in the cold. And until we fix that, this is you. No matter what issue you care about, because I'm betting your number one issue is not democracy reform. Your number one issue is one of many issues that are stuck on this treadmill. So we're going to run through this quickly because we don't have a lot of time. The problem, the solution, how we're going to win that solution, and a little bit about who we are. So this story starts with a study out of Princeton University. They looked at almost 1,800 polls taken over 20 years, looking at how public opinion corresponds or correlates to the laws passed by Congress. So the flat line, the horizontal line, is public support for an idea. The vertical line is the likelihood of that idea becoming a law. And in an ideal republic in which the supreme power is held by the people and their elected representatives, it would look something like this, right? Where if there's 50% support for an idea, there's about a 50% chance that it's going to happen. If there's an 80% support for an idea, there's about an 80% chance that it would happen. However, in our republic, it looks more like this. If there's 0 support for an idea, there's about a 30% chance it's going to happen. And if there's 100% support for an idea, there's again about a 30% chance it's going to happen. This is real. This is 20 years of research at Princeton. The conclusion was that the preferences of the average American appear to have only a minuscule, near zero, statistically non-significant impact on public policy. So this is what I left out. That wasn't for the entire republic, that was for the average American. That's not the lowest 10 percentile economically. It is the mid, the 50 percentile economically. For elites, it's better. If there's 100% support for an idea amongst elites, which is defined as the top 10% economically, there's about a 64% chance that it happens. And more importantly, when elites don't want something to happen, there's a near 0% chance that it will happen. Okay, so the question then becomes how? How did we get here? Well, let's look at the 2012 election. $7 billion was spent federally in that election, and this year it's estimated that the cost of the election could go as high as $10 billion. Now, because Donald Trump is imploding so rapidly, it is possible that that number will be more like 2012 just because a lot of conservative mega donors that normally would get in a big way might not. But regardless, we still have a system today where if you're a US senator, you have to raise $14,351 a day, 365 days a year, to have an average size war chest to run for re-election in this country. That's in an average state, not California where it's significantly higher. Now consider that 0.05% of Americans give $10,000 or more per year or per cycle to politics. And what's happened is Congress, that senator, has become dependent on the 0.05% of donors who give to politics at the high level. And what happens is those 0.05%, those are the ones they have dinner with, that they cocktail with, they go to multiple fundraisers with, they listen to, and it leaves 99.95% of Americans effectively irrelevant in the eyes of politicians. Not completely, but effectively. And this is because donations are a smart investment. Consider this. Sunlight Foundation looked at 7 years of data, the 200 largest spending entities in Washington, D.C. They invested $5.8 billion in the influence industry, and they got a $4.4 trillion return on their investment in the form of tax breaks, subsidies, and contracts. So, the cycle of corruption, legalized corruption that defines American politics in 2016 looks like that. You have moneyed interests, they hire lobbyists, 50% of the time, 50% of politicians leave Congress and become lobbyists. Those lobbyists cash in on their Rolodex and their entree and their donations, influence politicians who pass laws at the behest of the special interests, and the cycle goes on. Meanwhile, back at the farm, here are 6 of my favorite US congressional districts. Partisan gerrymandering, written, mapped out by partisans from both parties, more effectively by Republicans over the last few decades, but regardless, partisan gerrymandering that has led to 86% of US House districts as uncompetitive. 86%, just 14% are competitive. Meanwhile, 6 out of 10 Americans dislike or hate Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, but when someone else wants to get in the race as an independent or a third-party candidate, everyone freaks out because, oh no, this person's going to be a spoiler and spoil the election for one of those 2 main candidates from the 2 main parties. And this is particularly troubling when you consider this. Look at this slide. Just 14% of eligible voters in the United States this year voted for Trump or Clinton. Just 14%. So we have a situation where voter participation is low, which we'll get into in a minute, and you have a system that prevents independent and third-party candidates from running and winning, but it doesn't have to be that way. It's particularly important when you look at this graph. 42% of Americans are registered independents. Look at that arc. 29% are Democrats, just 26% are Republicans. We have a country that is more independent than it has been since Gallup started taking this poll, but we have no place for those independents to cast their vote because the system prevents independents from running and winning. Running for office, or picking a candidate, I should say, should be more like this. It should be like buying a car. In 2016, if you buy a car, there's literally dozens of amazing cars, the most beautiful cars that would run so well. You'd be so confident and inspired by your car because it's just so, I have an Acura, it's awesome. But this is what it looks like when we have to pick a president. And you may have somebody on here you like, but I'm going to submit to you that this is not the best possible leaders that this amazing country has to offer. And that's because the system is broken and precludes the best and brightest from wanting to run for office and being able to run a viable campaign. So instead, we're left with this. It's time for our annual, our quadrennial or whatever it is, presidential election. I'll take the one on the right, and the rest of the country will come with me. Meanwhile, in comparison to other countries, we rank 31st in voter participation. We are after Slovenia, Estonia, Czech Republic. What else? It's not good. So how did we get here? Again, system failure, because corruption is legal in America. This dysfunction is legal in America. And so the question then becomes, can we make corruption illegal? And can we fix the dysfunction? So we started by talking to some smart people. Lawrence Lessig, who you've probably heard of from Harvard, Trevor Potter, the former chair of the Federal Elections Commission, Jack Abramoff, who went to jail for several years, but certainly knows how the sausage is made in Washington, D.C. And that gets to the solution. So we asked these guys, would it be possible to pass a law that's constitutional and that would fix all this stuff? That would fix the gerrymandering, make it competitive. That would give voters more choices, let independent and third-party candidates run and win, increase participation, stop the bribery. And there was an unequivocal yes. Absolutely. This is totally a political question. It's not a legal question. There's a mythology that if we passed laws that fix this, the Supreme Court would throw it out on constitutional grounds. Not true. You could fix gerrymandering with independent nonpartisan commissions like they did here in California in 2008. Not a perfect fix, but it's a fix that can be done at the state level. You could create more choices by creating ranked choice voting and open primaries, sort of innovations on the open primaries that have been created over the last couple decades, but you can do better. Ranked choice voting works like this. It exists in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the United Kingdom. When you go to vote, you don't just vote your first choice. You also say, that's my first choice, but she's my second choice and he's my third. Then, if nobody gets more than 50% of the vote, the lowest scoring candidate gets eliminated and all the second place votes to that candidate get reapplied to the remaining candidates. They retally, and at some point, somebody gets more than 50% of the vote and they win. What's beautiful about this system is it's shown to work. It enables independent and third-party candidates to run and win without being sort of, dismissed as spoilers, and it actually depolarizes politics. I know that's a disturbing picture. But the reason is that if you have a ranked choice system, every candidate is incentivized saying, well, if I can't get their first place choice, I want to get their second. And so it's no longer pragmatic to throw bombs at other candidates like we're seeing today. And you can increase voter participation by automatic voter registration, which is essentially making voter registration an opt-out exercise instead of an opt-in exercise, which is frankly a no-brainer, especially in today's technologically savvy world. And then finally, you can stop the bribery and extortion, an incredibly important part of this puzzle, by passing laws that, for example, say you can lobby or you can donate, but you can't do both. Anybody who knows Sacramento or Washington, D.C. will tell you this is a complete game changer. You could pass a law that says politicians have to wait 4 or 5 years before they leave office and become lobbyists, and tighten the definition of lobbying so that they can't cash in on their access to the remaining other folks on the Hill or in the legislature. Jack Abramoff describes this as the single most important provision you could put in an anti-corruption law. It's the way he exploited power in Washington. You could end secret money by just saying all political money has to be disclosed, period. It's really simple. There's a no-brainer on that one. And you can empower voters with a small donor system or public funding. Now, what is that, you might ask? Well, Lessig talks about so-called dependence corruption. That is, if you don't change the economics of campaign finance, you don't change how campaigns actually work. If you don't change the economics, you don't stop this, right? You still have the coach or the player bribing the umpire, and you need to change that. So we need to change election funding. I love this guy took a picture of that slide, which makes me happy when the Homer Simpson slide gets a photo. So you change election funding by something that's new and innovative, and you guys are here because you want to know what's innovative. Democracy vouchers are innovative, which is a new thing that I'll talk about a little while, which essentially it's a way of publicly funding elections where every registered voter just gets a voucher. If you will, you're simply saying this $50 or this $100 that I normally would pay in taxes this election year, I'm redirecting to a politician whom I agree with and I think will actually look out for my interests, and that's dollar for dollar less that I will pay in my taxes this year. It's not a new idea. In Minnesota, they've had a similar system for 35 years. If you look there, 45% of donations to Minnesota state politics are in increments of $100 or less, up against the median state average of 9%. Cost, if you did it federally, that little yellow dot in the upper right-hand corner, that's the portion just of the US military budget that it would cost to have a fully subsidized campaign finance system where the people are donating instead of large donors. So if you could create that much efficiency in the most bloated military budget in the world, that's literally, it would cost maybe 4 large jet fighters. You could actually pay for a system of campaign finance that has integrity. So you could fix gerrymandering, create more choices, stop bribery, increase participation, all by passing a law. But here's where it gets more interesting. And lions on stilts are interesting. When you take all these things and you call it the American Anti-Corruption Act, 9 out of 10 people support it. 9 out of 10 people. Think about that. There's very few things that enjoy that kind of support. Now, the naive amongst us might say, Congress will pass it 9 out of 10, but the problem is on this issue, you're asking the fox to put a lock on the hen house more so than any other issue, and they're not going to do it. The current system is what got them in power, and they are disincentivized to change it. So we have to go around Congress, and that gets us to how we win. And winning is my personal obsession, and if you're going to go around Congress, the first question you want to ask is, who's doing it? And more importantly, who's winning? And as you know, the answer to that would be marriage equality and marijuana decriminalization. Now, I don't care what your views are on those issues. I really don't. This is a matter of political strategy, and that map on the left was completely gray 11 years ago. Not a single state. And the map on the right had no wins 20 years ago. And what people don't realize about gay marriage, marijuana decriminalization, and for that matter, gun rights on the other side, these were heavily architected movements. They did not happen organically. This guy, Tim Gill, a philanthropist in Colorado, he assembled the leading gay rights activists in the country in 2003, 2004, and 2005, and sat them down, and literally sat them down in a room in 2005 and said, I'll get you the money, but you guys, you do lobbying in the state level. You lobby on the federal level. You guys do court cases. You guys pass ballot initiatives. They got organized. Same thing with these 3 billionaires way back in '94. George Soros, Peter Lewis, and John Sperling around marijuana. Going to the ballot, each of those guys put $10 million down, started passing ballot initiatives and challenging in court. So these were architected movements. We are looking to replicate what they do by passing city and state anti-corruption acts all across the country that are uniquely tailored to each place that we work. So that's the basic idea. Now, an important point here is that this has been tried before. We have seen efforts to try to pass state-based campaign reform in the past, and they actually got pushed back. And so what we've done is we've come up with 3 innovations that can fix this. 1, and get us unstuck and actually win. 1 is by reframing the debate as corruption. 2 is using right-left coalitions. And 3 is moving comprehensive reform. And the way we do that is understand that money in politics, gerrymandering, voting systems, and campaign finance reform elicit this response in human beings. Correct. But the reality is that the people are around the corruption frame. This was a poll of millennials by conservative pollster Frank Luntz in February this year. If you could describe Americans' problems in 1 word, what would you choose? Corruption was the top by a long shot. Greed was the second. Inequality was the third. Interesting. This question asked nationally of both liberal and conservative respondents, is it very important to you that our elected leaders reduce the influence of blank in political elections? When you change money to corruption, conservative respondents, their answer goes up by 30 points. Yes, it's very important to me. This is important because conservatives at the grassroots are usually the slowest to respond to reform messages and jump on board. They kind of want to keep things status quo when it comes to reform. So you got to talk to them in language that resonates there. The left will come. left, right. This is how the American people self-identify. This is a fascinating slide. This has been 23 years of Gallup polls, twice a year. Are you conservative, liberal, or moderate? None of those numbers have moved more than 5 points in the last 23 years. And the reality is, however, that efforts to fix democracy have lived here for the last 30 years. Liberal groups speaking liberal speak to liberal audiences and trying to win seismic political economic change with 24% of the country. Meanwhile, all of these folks, polling shows they'll support comprehensive reform if you talk to them the right way and wrap up your proposal in the right way. So just look at that picture, commit that to memory. It makes the point in a minute. And then finally, comprehensive. Transparency, enforcement, limiting lobbyist contributions. These are all provisions that are polling literally at 90 points. The small donor system that I described, public funding, that polls at around 60 points. But if you wrap it all up together, that's when the magic happens. 87% support it nationally. Look at how it stacks up. Blue is Democrats, red is Republicans. I mean, there are very few issues on the planet that enjoy that kind of cross-partisan appeal. The pollster who did that poll said, yeah, this is incredible. You found a winner. We tested it in 2 other states. The next pollster said, this would be virtually impossible to lose if you put this in front of the people. So that's the idea. Get this thing out across the country, pass it from coast to coast. But we knew we needed a proof of concept. So we went to Tallahassee, Florida, to the city of Tallahassee in 2014. We put one of these anti-corruption acts on the ballot. We won with 2/3 of the vote, didn't even spend any money on the campaign. And that woman is the head of the Florida Tea Party Network, and the man is the head of Florida Common Cause, a very conservative, very liberal advocates who had never agreed on anything and worked hand in hand on this campaign. Fast forward to last year, we saw big victories in November at the midterm or the off-year election in Seattle and the state of Maine. We saw comprehensive laws passed at the ballot in both locations. First time ever, these democracy vouchers that I described to you were on the ballot and won in Seattle. And this has given us major momentum heading into 2016, where we're going in 2 states and San Francisco with a strong lobbying reform law that is just referred to the ballot in this city by the Ethics Commission. South Dakota, we have 2 Republican former legislators and a former Democratic legislator. We already have Koch brothers funded opposition. That's the only real opposition we've seen across the country is the Koch network. Traditional conservatives don't oppose us, but they don't like transparency. They've stated it through their networks. Memos have been leaked by ProPublica. They've already spent $50,000 on radio against us in South Dakota. They sent out 2 of these kind of mailers across the state. And we just did a poll last week after 6 weeks of opposition, and our numbers went up. So go figure. Washington State, we just submitted the signatures. We're on the ballot there. We've got the Democratic head of the city council in the eastern part of the state, Spokane. We've got someone from the League of Women Voters. We've got a Tea Party guy. And Hollywood is lining up behind this effort in an amazing way. We've got Adam McKay, who did The Big Short, and importantly to me, Anchorman and Talladega Nights, who just joined our board. David O. Russell, the guy in the middle down below, who did Silver Linings Playbook and American Hustle, is on our board, and another big producer. So we've seen a coalescing in Hollywood, which has been unprecedented on this issue. And so here's the vision. And we're running out of time. 2017, 2018, we go big with ballot initiatives from coast to coast around gerrymandering reform, around the instant runoff voting, ranked choice voting, open primaries, automatic voter registration, and anti-corruption laws. They're all nonpartisan. They can all be done through the ballot. And if you start to envision the map, you start to see a reality in which we can light up the map of the United States with comprehensive, smart, bold, effective laws that fix this democracy and end this ridiculous kind of facade, I don't even know, I'm not allowed to say what this election looks like to me currently, but it's upsetting and it doesn't have to be that way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use our last 5 minutes just to talk a little bit about who we are in the social media part. So represent us, 4 years old, we bring together conservatives and progressives to pass comprehensive anti-corruption democracy reforms across the country. We are sort of a hybrid of ballot initiatives, local organizing, because you need boots on the ground to pass and protect these laws, and brand building, because we need brands that you associate with democracy in the same way you have big, bold brands that you associate with environment or civil rights. We're only 18 staff. We're young. We have 50 chapters across the country. We have 6,000 people across the country that actually do things, volunteers. We have about 600,000 members. And our goal is to get that to millions. But as I get into our social media presence, I want to just make one caveat. In comparison to big for-profit companies or even mid-size, our numbers are tiny, and I get that. But in our world of democracy reform, this obscure field of democracy reform, it's been pretty remarkable. If you look at our YouTube views, our Facebook, in comparison to the other groups in this space, many of which have been there for 10, 20, 30, even 40 years, we've just been killing it. Because what we've done is we've managed to get people to kind of go from this to this on this issue. Like with this fake candidate we ran for Senate last year. We'll get a little audio on there.
People who run my campaign, they've made this commercial, and I'm in it. This campaign, it's not about me. It's about crafting a version of me that'll appeal to you. A version that visits random work sites with paid actors pointing at things. A version of me that doesn't find old people loathsome or pointless. Has a conventionally attractive yet curiously still family. Listening to my constituents, legislating, these are things I don't do. What I do is spend about 70% of my time raising funds for re-election. I'd do anything to stay in office. My name's Gil Fulbright, but hell, I'll change my name to Phil Goldbright or Bill Fulbright or fill up my mouth with farts. These are the things that are important to me. And these are the fine people that finance my campaign. Now, in order to do these things, I have to stay in office. And to stay in office, I have to keep these guys happy. Now, if any of these things make these guys unhappy, well, my hands are tied. So come November, the choice is clear. Do you want another spineless mouthpiece for special interest and lobbyists? Or a spineless mouthpiece for special interest and lobbyists? I'm Philip a Mouth with Farts, and I approve this message.
Good stuff, right? I know. So for us, this was a big deal. 13 million video views on that one, 3 million for his. It's interesting. I think the Trump campaign has been so surreal that it has sort of sucked the wind out of Gil's run for president, which never quite got off the ground. 18 million views there. Crowdfunding, we raised almost $200,000 for Gil to run. He had a bus in Kentucky. It was great. And we got covered on everything from Time to Today Show to we were on Fox, everywhere. Some of the takeaways, satire works and take it offline. And what I mean by that is like actually sort of running him for Senate in the real world was really important. Not just having this thing live just on the web was really important. Lobby Wow, another big hit, worth watching.
Hi, Vince here with Lobby Wow. I'm going to tell you how you can turn your tens of millions of dollars into literally billions. Here's how. The government hands out money all the time and rules favorably for big business every day. I bet you ask yourself, why am I such a stupid piece of crap? How do I get my hands on some of that sweet, sweet cash? Everything you tried doesn't work. You tried voting, but that never works. You tried calling your senator? I bet you have, you useless piece of crap. What about bribing your congressman? What, do you want to go to jail? Lobby Wow takes this useless bribe and turns it into a campaign contribution. There's literally nothing democratic about it. It works with drugs, it works with corn, it works with healthcare. So look at this great bowl of beef. What's wrong with it? Too expensive. You gotta sell 100% beef on the open market. Be way more profitable if you could cut it with some kind of cheap filler like you do your cocaine. But hey, that's illegal. All right, take a look at this. You getting this, camera guy? Oh, look at that, those regulations that come right off. GetLobbyWow.com. No more regulations means I can do whatever I want. Look it, you add your wood pulp, the ammonia, some of the pink slime. Have a little fun, I got some feces here, look at that. Profit. Sell those extra missiles to the Army, even though they didn't ask for them in the first place. Look at this, that's usually a big mess. Not with Lobby Wow. Look at these chumps. They didn't go to GetLobbyWow.com. You get a great return on investment. It works on both parties. And if you go here right now, because I can't do this all day, you're gonna get a sweet briefcase full of hot cash. Lobby Wow. It's gonna have you saying, holy shit, I can't believe this is legal.
All right, and we're out of time. So really quick, I just want to share the takeaways that we learned from this. One is we got 2 million views on this, which is really good for our site. We built a website around it. We didn't just do the video. It's really important to do that, kind of go the extra mile. That proved to be super important. And partnering up, lots of partnership. I'm not going to show the next video, but suffice to say, this one went huge. A clip from ABC News. It was topical. It was about leaked memos around the Democrats and selling access to the convention. 3.8 million views. Takeaways. Keep going timely, relevant video content with issues that are topical, that are in the news. And one of the last things I'll say is videos that perform well on Facebook, and Facebook continues, as you know, to be the big one, they boost future performance of all your other content. Remember that. If you can get one thing to do really well on Facebook and social media, it's going to help boost everything else you do, irrespective of how good or bad it is. Okay, that's it. There's lots of ways that we need help on this campaign. Come see me afterwards, check out Represent Us, and thanks everyone.